The scripture reading for this morning is 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 16. It says, "Rejoice always." Preach the word.
Well, first of all, let me say I'm humbled to be before you. I love this school, and I think you will always love this school too. The thing that happened to me is yesterday I went to the house, Chris and Barb's house, and I made a PowerPoint. And I was going to show you some things on Africa, but at 1:45 this morning I woke up and God and the Spirit just kept saying, tell your story. So I want to tell the experience I've had in 50 years of preaching the gospel. I had just returned from the Vietnam War, and I was working with a congregation in Phoenix, and the elders asked me if I would work with the teenagers, because I was 22 or 23, and so I said, yeah, I don't really know much Bible. I've read it a lot, but I don't know much Bible, but I'll be glad to do that. And so I began to teach the teenagers, and they began to ask me questions. And Ed, I didn't know the answers. I said, well, if you'll give me a week, I'll go study it out, and I'll come back and give you an answer next week. And so I finally went to the minister, and his name was Shorty Cardinal. I know some of you remember Shorty Cardinal. I'm sure you do, don't you, Truett? And old Shorty said, you've got to go to Sunset School of Preaching. I said, what's that? And so he began to tell me about Sunset, and we came down here, checked it out, and then in August of 1972, we started our first class. And you know, we had some struggles here. We came down with the GI Bill, and that wasn't much at that time, and I was leaving after our first semester. And Klein Payton said, if you'll go up there and live with the brethren at Hale Center, they'll pay for your rent. That's the only reason we were able to stay. And God provided. And so I was so excited because what we heard over and over is go into all the world and preach the gospel. You know, raise the banner. That was to be our challenge. And almost weekly when I was here, missionaries would come by. And they would tell us about their work. And I said, I'm going there. And then another one come next, I'm going there. And I was so excited. I wanted to go somewhere overseas and preach the gospel because he said, go to all the world. And so as we got closer, we began to raise money. And I didn't do so good raising money, Truett. And so we took a position in Miami Globe, Arizona. Truett's probably the only one in here knows where that's at. But I began preaching there. And I got up in front of the congregation, and you say, you know, I was at Sunset, and we went on all these campaigns, and we knocked doors. I hated knocking doors. And then we were around Sunset, and as we were students, we knocked doors, and I hated knocking doors. I was telling the congregation this. And I told them, I still hate to knock doors. I said, but you know somebody who needs the gospel, a family member, a friend. And if you'll just invite them to study, I'll come with you and we'll study. And as we study, I'll teach you how to study. And we went, in 3.5 years, we went from 54 to 172 people. And it wasn't all me. I was teaching them how to teach the gospel. And we were so excited, but one day I got a call from Milton Langston. And Milton said, brother, I need some help in Lesotho. And Sunset's given me the permission to have you go down there and interview with the elders. But there's another guy going by the name of Randy Robinson. And they're going to interview you, and one of you will come and help me. Well, we got down here, and I guess they liked both of us because they sent both of us. And then we had a 3-family team in Lesotho. It was it was raise the banner, shout Hosanna, go into all the world. We were so excited. And we had one of the early AIM teams. Chris and Barb was on our AIM team. If any of you know Chris and Barb, I think you do, right? And I was the coordinator for the first year, but my mother-in-law lived with us. And she got very sick over there, and after about almost 5 years, they said, we can't do any more for her, and so you're going to have to go back to the U.S. to get some help. So I called the elders here at Sunset, and they said, yeah, I'll bring her home. So we came back. I was disappointed because I wanted to stay in Lesotho. I was just really getting a good grip on the language. And we were doing some good work. And boy, the AIM team opened up so many doors. We had a lot of Bible studies, but they opened up so many doors. And we were so excited about it. Well, I went to Eastern Oregon. And there was a congregation there of about 35, and we began to preach, and we were getting up to 60. But the problem was it was a gold mine town. And there were, in the congregation, all but my family and another family were gold miners. And the gold mine shut down. And everybody moved away except us and the other family. And I said, well, what am I going to do? And so I'd been in the Marine Corps, and so that's right, hoorah! So I got out of, I went to the Army National Guard, and I said, I want to join just so I could at least have that weekend money. And so I started preaching, and because we didn't have but one other family, I said, well, can I preach on Sunday here in the armory? Well, yeah. So anybody that wanted to stay, I preached in the armory. And then they put me on active duty. I didn't mean to go on active duty, but they put me on active duty, and I thought, go into all the world and preach the gospel. Raise the banner. And so Chris encouraged me to tell this story, by the way. Finally they put me in recruiting because I had a gift of gab, I guess. I was putting a lot of men in the military. And we were having a recruiters meeting, big gathering at the end of the year to talk about our successes and our failures. And we were having a talent show. And they kept saying, well, Sergeant Goodyear, you got to have a talent. I said, I don't have any talents. He said, no. You know, guys were playing saxophone, some were singing. I wasn't good at any of those things. And they said, no, you have to have that. I said, you won't like my talent. And they said, no, really, if you got one. I said, you won't like it. No, we want you to do it. So I get up in front of all these guys. We were having dinner. Some of them were having alcohol. And I quoted the crucifixion scene. And I was the only one that got a standing ovation. And it wasn't me, it was Jesus that got the standing ovation. Raise the banner. Shout Hosanna. Chris told me to tell this story. We had another one where we were having an 8-state recruiter meeting. And again, we were having dinner. And they were having karaoke. Now, if you've ever heard me sing, you know that wouldn't be me. And they kept saying, well, by then I was a sergeant major. They said, well, Sergeant Major, you got to get up and sing in karaoke. And I said, well, I don't know any songs. Oh, surely you know some song. And I said, you won't like my song. And so I finally got up. I sang Amazing Grace. But you know, about 20 guys got up and sang with me. Raise the banner. Well, they transferred me to Western Oregon, and I started going to the Southwest Church of Christ in Tigard, Oregon. And they had a mission committee, and they asked me if I'd be on it since they knew I'd been to Lesotho, and I said, sure. And we started supporting a guy by the name of Sunday Oekanum Sr. Truett, I know you know him. And he was in Akatasun, Nigeria. And then we started supporting another man in Nigeria, in Obudu, Nigeria, name of Prince Ube. And they said, well, you've been to Africa, and we're kind of afraid to go over. Would you mind to go over there and work on this? And we went over there, and Sunday and I became great friends, and he wanted to start a school in Akatasun. And we helped him start the school. Matter of fact, I taught in some of the first classes that they had there in a little shack-like place that we had. And so we also had some work in Zimbabwe, and I went to Zimbabwe, and in 2008, I got a call from my wife. She said Sunday had died. And Sunday and I had become so close together in raising the banner. And so I hurt so bad. And then in October of that year, I met a man by the name of Emmanuel Essien. Some of you know him. I said, Emmanuel, Sunday is dead, now you go on. And he took over the school. And you know, I love Klein Payton, but I think Truett Adair has raised the bar on SIBI. And that's exactly what Emmanuel has done at CAO Essien Bible College. And about that time, Tim Burrow began to call me. And he said, brother, would you consider going to Singapore? Well, Jerry Hogg, and some of you know Jerry Hogg, got a hold of Tim and he said, what are you talking about? This guy has been in Africa all his life and you want to send him to Singapore? He said, I need help in Africa. So Tim asked me, would I go to Africa, to West and Central Africa? And so we began to be involved in that in October of 2010. Well, we already had 2 schools. We had one in Akatasun, and Prince Ube, we helped start that one in Obudu after Daryl Foltz, Daryl Memorial Bible Institute. And so I said, well, Tim, here's 2 schools. We can already associate them with Sunset. And so Tim allowed it, and we signed the contracts, and those 2 schools have 9 satellite campuses. It wasn't long until we signed 2 more schools in Cameroon, one in Bamenda and one in Buea. And the first African to graduate from the master's program, S.O. Aaron, cum laude from Sunset. And now Sunset is helping him by support him as he works with the Sunset and also the 10,000 voices. You see, God raises the banner when we'll let him use us. I was involved in signing 4 schools, Kumasi, Nyinin, Tarkwa, and Swedru in Ghana. We signed 2 schools in Liberia Bible College and Wela. And where you at, Chris? I know you've been to Wela and slept in George's house. Hot, right? Very hot, right? And those schools were signed. We signed a school in Sierra Leone in 2019 for Sunset. And because of Jerry Hogg and his illness, he was going less and less to South Africa, so Tim asked me to start covering some of South Africa. We signed up, I helped sign up a school in Kenya. International Bible, ISBE, Institute of Practical Christian Ministry. And I've taught there a number of times. And then we signed 2 more in Uganda. Why? Because you raise the banner. You just let God work through you. And then we signed one in Namayingo, Uganda, and one in Kasese, 2 sides of the place. And we're about to sign a school in Mbeya, Tanzania. And I think about this, and I think about well, why did God send me to Miami Globe? And the reason he sent me to Miami Globe, he wanted to get my attention. Because where you are is the world. And he said, go into all the world. And I thought that meant I had to leave the U.S. Number 3 populous nation in the world. And sometimes we think we have to do something grandiose in going out of this country. But we can do something grandiose here if we realize, raise the banner. And I get excited about going someplace to preach. I get excited whether it's here or wherever, because God said, raise the banner. Like I said, I've been preaching almost 50 years. And I know some people that have stopped preaching. And the reason I believe they stopped preaching is they lost their excitement of raising the banner. That's sad to me. If you could be excited when you're here at sunset, why can't you continue that excitement? Rejoice evermore. Short verse, right? And so we'll have trials. And God's going to take us through those trials. Oh, Abe Lincoln, you said, well, you know, you're going to run into a bunch of old churn heads in congregations. And you do. But you're not serving them, you're serving God. And in serving God and with your excitement, you're going to help them churn heads turn into something else. And find out, why are they a churn head? I met one in the first congregation. You know why he was a churn head? He didn't even understand grace. He thought he had to earn his way to heaven. Once he learned about grace, he wasn't a churn head anymore. But we have to have excitement. And so I just wanted to tell you, if you're here and you're just becoming involved in the ministry, you can still be excited after 50 years of serving in the ministry. May God richly bless you and Jesus give you all kind of peace.